Hello everyone. Well, it's Crystal again, and I'm going to be conducting dissolving Peeps. So my problem was that my Peeps were a little too stale. My question is, what substance was going to best soften or dissolve my Peeps? And my hypothesis was that if I dip my Peeps in Coke, they will dissolve the fastest. So I'm going to be measuring it in a time span of 5 hours to see which substance makes my Peeps dissolve the most. Obviously, my Peeps are my dependent variable because they are the dissolving of the Peeps. It's what's going to be measured. I will be using 10 ounces of vinegar, 10 ounces of milk, 10 ounces of Coke Zero, 10 ounces of water. This will be my independent variable because it's the variable that will change. Then my controls will be, obviously, that all my Peeps are all the same size. I'm using the exact same amount of each substance to dissolve the Peeps into. So it's going to be based on the substance, not on the amount. So now I'm going to be opening my Peeps, and I'm going to place one Peep in each one of the substances. They are Halloween themed because it is Halloween season. So we'll just gently place one Peep. This is what the Peep looks like, and that's what we'll be testing. We will test how much it dissolves into each substance. Place one in the vinegar. Place one in the milk. Place one in the Coke Zero. And place one Peep in the water. I'm going to dip them just a little tiny bit, just so that we can get the full substance onto the Peep, if it allows. That was the vinegar. For the milk, for the Coke Zero, and for the water. As you can see, this is what they look like initially, and over the course of 5 hours, we will see which of the substances makes the Peep dissolve the fastest. One of the things that you can observe right away is that, for example, in the vinegar and in the water, the color changed right away. It's a little bit more difficult to tell in the Coke, obviously, because of the color of the Coke. But it's very, very noticeable in these two substances. And the milk still remained white. So the immediate observation was the change in the color of the substance of the water and the vinegar. So after the first hour, we're going to go ahead and take a look. One of the most visible changes in the substance would be in the vinegar solution, because you can see the bubbling all across the rim, and there's bubbling right outside of the substance and the contact with the marshmallow. Now, if we flip it over to where's the most contact, it is white. It has turned white, and it is very soft, tender to the touch. But the most visible reaction is that of the bubbling outside. For example, the regular Peep is this one. So this is what it looked like as when it went in. So you can see the difference. It's now completely white from the bottom. For the milk, when we flip it over, there's no change in the substance, but it is now white from the bottom. It is tender, a little bit more tender than it was initially, but there's very little change to the color of the milk, so it makes it a little bit less dissolved per se. This one is the one with the Coke Zero. And this one looks a little bit dissolved. Let's turn it around, and then you can see a very, very clear, see how it has started to go away. It's very tender, soft, and where you might not be able to see it in the Coke, it does have a difference. Oh, there it is. Look, you can see. It's coming up. It's beginning to come apart. None of the other substances have made it begin to come apart. The water has had little to no effect on the marshmallow. Maybe perhaps just the coloring on the bottom, but even then it's still a little bit firm, so it's had little to no effect. So on a scale, I would say the least effect has been the water, then it has been the milk, then it has been the vinegar, and the most thus far on this after the first hour is going to be the Coke Zero. So at the second hour, here we have the vinegar. We continue with the bubbling, and we continue with the bubbling right there. It's very visible. And we turn it around. It's very soft, very mushy. See, and you can see the effect. You can see it dissolving. It's like a lot of little air bubbles right there. And you can see the cream where it's dissolving. So clearly, and you can see the little chunks that are starting to dissolve off. With the milk, it's also mushy. It's becoming yellow. It's very mushy, just not as mushy as, per se, the vinegar. Now we have the Coke. It's extremely, you can see, whenever you flip it, it's coming apart. It's very mushy. The consistency has gotten, if you even notice, it's gotten thinner. It's even gotten thinner, so it's definitely dissolving. It's definitely dissolving at a much more rapid pace than all the other ones. And then we have the water, which is hardly any change whatsoever. I mean, it's a little mushy, it's a little softer, of course, but I mean, not much change at all. So definitely, least change is still water. Then it would probably be milk, and then it would be vinegar, and then the most change still is Coke Zero. So after the third hour, we're seeing some significant changes. So for the vinegar, it has stayed the same. Progress has actually kind of stalled a little bit. It's still a little bit squishy, a little bit mushy. You see the reaction. It's very sticky now. Like, as you can see, it's sticking onto the container. And it's turned like completely white. It's very sticky, so it's definitely dissolving. One of the biggest changes we've seen has been in the milk. In the milk, it's become very spongy. And you can see the difference in the appearance. It's starting to tear away onto the marshmallow. And you can see it's starting to see the little in the milk. So that's one of the bigger progress changes. The Coke Zero, you can see the face is almost gone. Let's turn it around. It's very, you can still see how it's coming apart. And very sticky. The consistency is very spongy. The face is almost gone. One of the biggest changes has been this one, the water. As you can see over the last hour, it's actually come apart. It's starting to dissolve, and there's pieces in the solution. And then the face of the Peep is almost gone, which means it's starting to weather away. When you flip it over, it's very sticky already. It's very spongy. So after this third hour, definitely the progress has stalled for the vinegar, so vinegar came in last. And then I would say it's the milk. Then the water has made a very surprising turn. And then I think the Coke Zero is still in the lead in how dissolved the Peep is. So we are on hour number 4, and as you can see, there is quite a bit of dissolving going on here. It's reacting. It's still, see a lot of the bubbles, but it's not necessarily like coming apart with the vinegar. With the milk, it's beginning to look a little spongier. The pieces, let me turn it around. It's very, very sticky, so that's how you can tell it's definitely dissolving. It's very sticky. And then we have the Coke Zero with the Coke Zero. Coke Zero continues. Progress continues. See these pieces that come off. It's definitely dissolving. And with the water, the face is almost gone, so the water is making some progress. It's very sticky as well. It's very spongy. And you can see a lot of these particles of the marshmallow have come off. So the water is making some headway for sure. So thus far, the vinegar has stayed pretty much the same. Then I would say, again, it's the milk, the water, and still Coke Zero is still in the lead as far as how the consistency, how sticky it is, and how much of it is dissolving into the liquid. So the Coke Zero is still winning, but water is a close second.
So we are at our 5th hour, and so we are observing which one has the most visible changes to see which one has dissolved the most, and which one the consistency has changed the most. So when we look at vinegar, vinegar pretty much has stayed the same from the last time that we saw it. Still, you see the reaction of the bubbling, you see this, it's very sticky, but nonetheless, it's definitely not making any significant progress. Then we have the milk. The milk also seems to have stalled a little bit. The reaction, like it's still very spongy, sticky. It's lost color, but somehow it's not dissolving very well because color doesn't seem to have changed very much in the milk. It is coming apart a little bit. You can see the particles right there and right there, but it's still not making much of a difference. Coke Zero. Now when you look at Coke Zero, the face on the front, on the top is almost gone. Then you flip it around and look at that, falling apart. This is dissolving at its finest. It is dissolving because of all the substance that it's in. It's super sticky, like it sticks. Look, it's super sticky. It'll stay on there probably if I let it. So definitely very much dissolved. And then we have the water. The water has changed the appearance. The little face is almost gone. You see the particles that are around it. It is sticky, but see, it won't stick to the container. So it's not that dissolved. But it's definitely spongy. It's definitely the consistency. So definitely after the 5th hour, the least noticeable change would have been the vinegar. Our vinegar pretty much peaked at around, since the very beginning at around our 1st hour, and it pretty much stayed the same. It was just a medium change, nothing really significant. Then we had probably our milk, which our milk made some headway, but then at some point it just kind of stopped. It just became a little bit of the chunks just came off of it and everything, but it never really dissolved into the milk. It never even changed the color of the milk, so it didn't make much of a difference. And then I think it was the water. I think the water was the most surprising difference. The fact that, it started taking away the little face, and it started the marshmallow started coming apart. You can see all the different particles right there. The color changed, so I think that made some significant headway. So this one probably came in second place. And our most significant change was definitely Coke Zero. As you can see on my table, it is all on there. It's going to be real sticky. And the fork that we're using, all the other forks are clean. This one is not. You can see it's clearly coming apart. Oh, there it is. That peep is clearly coming apart. Had I left it for a few more hours, I can predict that it would have definitely further dissolved into the substance. So, definitely our first place winner was Coke Zero. Water came in second. Vinegar came in, milk came in third, and vinegar came in last.
So this is my chart. This axis we have the amount of elapsed time, and on this axis we have the observed changes. I color-coded it to make it easier to read. Blue will be water, orange will be vinegar, red will be Coke Zero, green will be milk. So I went by no change, minimal change, medium change, maximum change. So we had, from here, we have our initial, when we first put in the Peeps, the first hour, after the first hour, after the second hour, after the third, after the fourth, after the fifth. So, immediately when we put them, there was an observable change. And that was the fact that the water and the vinegar changed color. They started to turn green. No observable change was made with Coke Zero or with the milk. The milk remained white and Coke Zero is a dark color, so it was very difficult for us to gauge whether there was a reaction in that way. So that's why I gave it a medium change, since it wasn't really dissolving, like falling apart. I didn't want to give it a maximum change, so we went ahead and gave it a medium change because it was very observable and it really made a difference, and these two just stayed at no change. After 1 hour, you observed the change immediately on the Coke Zero. It began changing in the color, the consistency began to change, it became much stickier. With the water, very minimal change. I mean, it just became a little bit more spongy, absorbed some of the water, but there was not much change there other than the coloration that we had already observed on this one. Then we had our vinegar. Our vinegar, we definitely saw a reaction. The reaction was the bubbling. The bubbling on the outer rim, the bubbling around the peep. So there was definitely, I think that was a medium reaction. Not a maximum because it wasn't like a huge difference, but you could see that something was happening. A reaction was present. Then we have the milk. On the milk, very minimal change. There was change in the coloring on the bottom of the marshmallow, but not really much. After the second hour, change continued to show on the Coke Zero. The Coke Zero increasingly became stickier, you could even see it on the fork whenever we would flip it around. It was just very sticky and just not, it was not staying in the form that it was initially put in. Then with the water, it was very minimal change. I mean, water was just becoming a little bit, it was almost like a little sponge, but it was not at all showing any signs of much of a reaction. And then a medium change for vinegar because the bubbles continued. So the bubbles continued throughout. So it was a very medium change because the bubbles increased, but it was not like a very different change. Like it wasn't dissolving very well. And then we had the milk. Milk, very minimal change, kind of just like the water. That's why I left them at the same rate. Then after hour 3, Coke Zero continued to lead the pack. So Coke Zero became increasingly sticky, increasingly brown, increasingly thin. It was just dissolving. Our second was our milk. Our milk really made a turn. The top of the peep started changing in color, started changing in the consistency, and became increasingly sticky. Particles started going off into the substance. That's why I gave it a little bit more than a medium change, because it definitely had more of a change than we saw in water and in vinegar. In vinegar, the bubbling continued, but it pretty much stayed the same as it had in the second and in the first hour. I mean, maybe just a little bit more bubbles, but not much of a significant change. Therefore, I just left that at a medium change. And then we had our water. With water, we had more of a change than we had seen in hour 2. The phase started coming off a little more. You start seeing some of the particles. It was a little bit stickier. But definitely, Coke Zero won that one. Then on hour 4, Coke Zero continued to lead the pack. It was just increasingly becoming stickier and stickier, just being showing much more of a progression than all of the other substances. And then we had water. Water really made a comeback. So the water really started to disintegrate the marshmallow. It started to disintegrate it more than the milk did. That's why I gave it a little bit more of a change than I did for the milk, because it disintegrated it a little bit more. And then the milk had a good progression, not as much as it had on maybe perhaps hour 3, and that's why water took it a little bit more than the milk did. And the vinegar had a minimal change because it really stayed the same. If at this point if it wasn't progressing, I was just giving it a minimal change because it was really minimally changing. And then at the very end, our 5th hour, Coke Zero, once again, maximum change. Extremely sticky, falling apart on the fork. You would pick it up, and it was just all over the place. Coke Zero was definitely the maximum change. Then we had second water. Water was starting to disintegrate the marshmallow. The face on the marshmallow, on the top of the marshmallow, was pretty much gone. So it was definitely a medium change, not as drastic as Coke Zero, but definitely a close second. And then as a minimal change, we had milk. Milk pretty much was disintegrating. There were a few particles that were disintegrating into the substance, but it was not as much as per se it was in water, but it was a minimal change. And then there was no change in vinegar. At this point, vinegar had remained the same. I gave it a minimal change because it wasn't really changing, and I gave it no change because it had remained pretty much the same since about hour 3. So, therefore, my hypothesis was if I dip my Peeps in Coke, then they will dissolve the fastest. And as we can see here, definitely and by far, our fastest dissolving substance was Coke Zero. So let me give you one last glimpse. Here we have 10 ounces of vinegar, 10 ounces of milk, 10 ounces of Coke Zero, and 10 ounces of water. But by far, our best dissolving substance was Coke Zero. The only thing that I might do differently in the future would definitely be just going ahead and maybe take more time, maybe giving it 1 day, giving it 2 days, just to observe the real different changes. And maybe changing the temperature of the substances, maybe making them really hot or making them really cold to see if that affected the rate of that it would dissolve the marshmallow. But as of right now, my hypothesis proved to be correct, which was that if you dip Peeps in the Coke, they will dissolve the fastest.